want to talk about the debt crisis. I sort of want to talk about the morality of the debt crisis, the ethical issues involved. Because I think sometimes it overlooks a lot of the issues that are involved over there. And what sort of bothered me very much was how the people who were perceived to be more religious, say the more right-wing individual people and so forth, they seem to act without a concern for paying the debt. That's very simplistic, I know, but it's something that's very much on my mind in terms of how the ethics, all the various ethical issues that were involved in the last few weeks, didn't really come to the forefront. I saw a couple little points here and there about that, but didn't really come to the forefront. You know, it's an interesting thing about. Anyways, you know something? Give me a sec here. I want to arrange my copying and so forth, and be right back. Okay, you know, I find there's an interesting thing here that exists a lot of times with stuff in the news. You know, there are two types of halachot. Okay. One, a little bit different definition than you usually hear about in terms of the difference between chukim and mishpatim, between the mitzvot that are irrational, the quote-unquote irrational, and mitzvot that are rational. But one of the things that exists is mitzvot which create their own world, and there's mitzvot that deal with the world as it is. Hold on one sec, please. Hold on one sec, please. Okay. Anyways, sorry about that. Okay, and then Kosher too. Sorry about that. Someone just said something to me. Okay, anyway, so here's what I want to get into. There are certain mitzvot which create their own world. Let's say like kashrus. There's nothing to do with. There's no other world beside the world of kashrus. It's either kosher or not kosher. There's no other issues. We don't have any natural morality. We don't have any concepts. It's basically the halacha that defines it or doesn't define it. Okay, it's kosher. It's not kosher. It's totally defined by the halacha, and that basically is it. Now there are people trying to take over definitions and kashrus and so forth. But basically, it's all self-contained within the halachic system. Then there's other mitzvot that deal with the world and take issues that are issues in the world and try to present the Torah perspective on it within a context where other people do have perspectives on it. For example, marriage, right? Every society seems to have a concept of marriage, right? The Torah has its definition of marriage. The point is how does the Torah definition deal with other people's definitions? Is there some kind of interaction? Is there not an interaction? For example, can natural morality's perspective on a good marriage that has any standing vis-a-vis the Torah definition of a good marriage? And that's part of the issues involved, and you'll see within the Torah discussion itself, these are things that are discussed and investigated. What can we learn from the world? What we cannot learn from the world? What do we teach the world? How do we relate to the world? This is all part and parcel of the issue. So the fact is what I find is most people when they, I think I spoke about this last week as an intro, most people when they talk about laws and so forth, they talk about it, usually within the laws of kashrus and things of that nature. What I find is I usually am going towards those issues in halacha that relate to society. I'll give you an example, totally different example. There's an issue, and when I try to say relate to society, using the halachic framework and halachic, I'm saying what's really going on in society, how can we understand it, in terms of using Torah's perspective, understanding society, understanding where we are at odds with society to a certain extent. A greater depth of understanding of this from a Torah perspective. Okay? Okay, Donna's making a statement about marriage, and marriage is made up of mixed yokes. I have to understand what you mean by mixed yokes, Donald. I'm not sure what you mean by that. If you're talking about mixed, different objectives or so forth, yeah, I agree with you. Obviously, I'm not talking about different religions. I'm not talking about an intermarriage. I'm talking about how we understand a value of marriage. Like, for example, what is the value of romance in a marriage? Okay? What's the value of romance in a marriage? Okay? So, if you go out to the world and you ask the world what's the value of romance in a marriage, I think you'd have a general concept that romance is significant. Okay? There's an idea of romantic and so forth and so forth. That's the general world. They would tell you that romance has a lot to do with marriage. What's the Torah perspective? And what I mean by that is, what is the Torah perspective on romance in a marriage? Okay, now, the fact you can have an opinion that says, who cares what the world thinks about romance in a marriage? Maybe it's irrelevant. Who cares? We have our own definition of marriage. It has nothing to do with romance. That's a viable theory. There's other people who might say, well, you see from the world that they consider romance to be part of the marriage, and the Torah is dealing with a concept that's in the world. Therefore, I would say that the Torah also takes into account romance. I'm not talking about different religions. I'm talking about values that exist out there in the world and how the Torah speaks about this. See, this is something that exists in a lot of aspects of thought. The point is we don't live in an ethical vacuum. The world has ethical perspectives. Okay? Some of these what I mean by the world has ethical perspectives, they have concepts which we all also understand to have some kind of ethical basis. You can call it natural morality, stuff like that. I mean, the fact of the matter is a big machlokas in a lot of issues. But the truth is for example, who is it? There's one of the Gaonim, just slips my mind. One of the Gaonim wrote a Hagdama, wrote an introduction. See, Don, that's an interesting aspect. Torah requires we love our spouse. Is that true? Is that true? And what do you mean by love? What do you mean by love? Okay? Well, let me get back to that in a second. The question is what you mean by love. The Torah requires to have a romantic feeling towards our spouses. Okay, let me get back to that in a second. But what I want to say is I want to deal with I was about to say something. What was I about to say? Oh gee, I lost my thought. I'm sorry. I was about to go into an example, and I now forget what it was. But we'll continue on this. But see, I know I was talking about one of the Gaonim wrote a Hagdama to introduction to the Gemara, and in it he talks about the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach, and he basically says the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach are the result of rational thought. Not like the Rambam. The Rambam holds the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach to really be one of the Chassidim Umas Ha'olam, one of the righteous of the world. You have to accept the 7 Noachide laws as a tzivui, as a command from Sinai. This Gaon, I can't believe I forget the name of the Gaon, disagrees and says that Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach are from rational thought. So he says that rationalism can lead to a certain ethical conclusion. The Rambam also says that mishpatim, mitzvah sichlius, these are all definitions of mitzvot that also can be derived from man's mind. The point is how does Torah connect with those things? So, does everything comes out from man's mind? Is it good? Is it not good? And so forth. So Donald's raises a point here that the Torah says we should love our spouse. That the fact is it's a tremendous mitzvah in Shalom Bayis. It's a tremendous mitzvah to bring about as a concept of Shalom, peace, reus, connection between husband and wife. It's very, very important. The question is what type of love is supposed to be between husband and wife, and then you compare it to the non-Jewish world, and they have a term for unique love, and that's romantic love. Romance, romantic love. Is a Jew supposed to have a romantic love with his wife? Is there supposed to be that concept of romance? Or is romance basically, and by the way, I've had someone once say this to me, that romance is basically the Yetzer Hara. It's from the evil inclination. It's just a fancy word for a sexual drive. It's just another variation of lust. Now, that may be shocking to you, but there are people who maintain that. For example, so you may say this, that the fact is that there's supposed to be romance, not supposed to be romance. So the truth is it's not so simple. What I mean by romance is, I guess I'm using that term in the general world perception of that term. Romance with a certain sexuality. Romantic. Flowers and violins and some sexual attraction of a certain way. Donald, what are the general rules of the Orthodox Tuba? There's the general rules. Donald says here, in my practice, it is my belief that a couple should follow the general rules of the Orthodox Tuba. What are those rules? What are those rules? Are those rules demand romance between the two of them? There's obligations. Usually Tuba talks about the husband's responsibility to support his wife, right? It's usually a financial relationship in terms of the Orthodox Tuba. But is there a romantic perception? Now, the fact is I'm not going to answer that. The truth is I wasn't trying to answer that, but the fact is that's the type of question that we work for our wife. I mean, the fact is, I think what you're saying, Donald, is that we're supposed to support our wives. That's correct, right? But is that romance, or is it more of a business relationship? It's not. It really is not. What's the word I'm looking for? The fact is that I wasn't planning to give a share on this tonight, but this is a certain direction that I really want to talk about in terms of we have connotations of what marriage is about from the non-Jewish world. In other words, if you're talking to a non-Jew and you say the term good marriage, that person has a concept, you have a concept. How similar is your concept to that person's concept? See, for example, let me take the word honesty. Okay? If you go to a non-Jew and say honesty, he has an idea of honesty, and you have an idea of honesty. Do you think you both have the same ideas? Well, in certain ways, you would think yes. But is that really absolutely true? Okay? In certain ways, you'll find that there might be some distinctions between the Jewish concept of honesty and the non-Jewish concept of honesty, because in the Jewish concept of honesty, there's the recognition that ultimately all property belongs to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So it makes somewhat of a difference. Let me give you an example of that. You see, there's difference in terms of Jewish ethics. I'll give you an idea in terms of property. The non-Jewish perspective of property is very much of is I own it. I have a right to let someone use it, not use it. It's mine. I have total authority over that property. In a Jewish perspective, the ownership of property is utilitarian, which really means that by saying it's my property, I have the right to control the usage of that property to ensure that I have the use I need of that property. Okay? And so forth. So let me give you an example. Let's say you have a piece of land in Alaska that you only go to in the summer, okay, and the rest of the year you have no contact with that land, and basically it's all someone wants to walk on that land at some time when you're not there, and the person traveling on this land will not cause any damage to the land, will not affect your utility of the land in one iota. Okay, should you let that person use the land? From a halakhic perspective, is to see yes, that person really almost has another right to use land because he's not affecting your utility at all. So that's an example of the difference in that. Let's just read what Cheryl's saying over here. But if there's an overlap between the Jewish and non-Jewish concept of good marriage or of honesty, I would not necessarily think that implies that Jewish Jews adopted non-Jewish Jews matter. You're absolutely correct. Absolutely correct, Cheryl. If there's an overlap between them, it doesn't necessarily come from the same source, or doesn't necessarily imply that there's an overlap. It doesn't imply that the Jewish world adopted the non-Jewish world, but they basically might say that the concept it comes from one source, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, God. In other words, God creates this knowledge. You have to remember that the world, the creator of the world is the same creator of Torah. So there's a lot of people who say that ultimately the world and Torah have to connect. There's this concept: the world and Torah have to connect because they both have the same creator, the same source. So if that's true, both have the same source, so we expect them to connect. So the fact is that the Torah should say honesty, and the Torah's definition of honesty and the world's definition should be somewhat similar, should not be surprising to us. It doesn't mean we learned it from them. It doesn't mean, right? And it may not mean that they learned it from us. It may mean they learned it through some derech hateva, through earth, rational ways, natural morality. It was something that was placed in time, and we learned it from Torah. But on the other hand, there might be an overlap. And the fact is, this opens up a further question of how far we can learn from the non-Jews. Okay, in this perspective, there may be, Let's go that how much can we learn from the non-Jews? This is all part of the issue. It's a really in-depth Torah discussion. Now, Donald's bringing us back to marriage and think that this question has destroyed far too many marriages. Yeah, it's possible. It's possible because the non-Jews may be presenting a value which might be different. That's really what I'm getting at. That's really what I want to get at. The fact is that by being very, very keen or very perceptive of what the world is thinking, you're able to understand how the thinking is different than our thinking. Okay, and that's and don't say our values are different. Yes, Torah values are different, but on the other hand, there's also seems to be an overlap between our values and other values. This really gets into the big issue of how much you learn from secular studies, the role of philosophy, and things of that nature. It's a whole big issue. Okay, so there's a whole world of Torah thought, that says you can learn certain things in the non-Jewish world. There's a whole world of Torah thought. It's very conscious about what we learn from the non-Jewish world. And the point is what I'm trying to say is something, because what I find is that you see that there's something that they have in terms of values, but it doesn't necessarily totally overlap, coordinate with our values, and we have to be aware of that distinction. And that's perhaps one of the big issues that we have always in the world. And the same example is that when the non-Jewish world talks of honesty and we talk of honesty, we may think it's similar, but we have to understand the difference. But on the other hand, we also have to understand that there may not be that difference. It's a difference between comparing, you have to be very careful of knowing the difference and not knowing the difference. Let me give you an example of what I mean. If you and what I'm trying to say is you really have to you have to pick up the subtle issues here. See, it's very easy to just say that these values outside there have nothing to do with Torah, right? Totally, take a position that says we have nothing, we don't need to gain any insight from the outside world. There's other people who think that we have the exact same values, but the fact is you have to have the insight to understand where we can learn and where we can't learn, right? Chachma b'goyim tamid, wisdom in the non-Jewish world you can learn, believe it. Torah b'goyim al tamid. It's a statement from the Gemara that the wisdom from the non-Jewish world you can learn, you can believe. Torah from the non-Jewish world you can't believe. So you have to understand what's wisdom, what's Torah, and we have a responsibility to learn wisdom. Okay. Okay. Okay, you see, Cheryl, you're making a point here. What do you mean by Jewish, non-Jewish? Are we talking learning from the religious world, from the not religious world? When you say deeply religious non-Jews, that's exactly it. That's exactly part of the issue. Is a deeply religious non-Jew, does that person really have the same religious perspectives as a Jewish religious person? Okay, many from Kanchai too that are similar. Okay. Okay. Are there any comparable that are similar to neighbors' very perceptive juxtaposition between moral man and immoral society? I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with that. Maybe I should be, but for some reason it's just not coming to me. Okay. Okay, if you want to clarify. Well, to say something that our values are different is not always the case. Seldom is. That's true. The truth is they're not always the same and not always different. Okay. Right. I mean, this is okay. Yeah, I agree with you, Donald. But when you're saying good enough to be your world, does that mean, is that romantic? Are you saying that in a romantic perspective? Okay. Like, how are you saying this? Okay. Yeah. For some reason, this book sort of hits me, and I might have seen it. But it's just not coming to me right now. Sorry. Okay. Someone want to just give me the opening ideas of this moral man and moral society, and let me understand this a little bit more. Okay, but what I'm saying, okay, okay, what you're getting at is practice and romance. It's good, but the fact that you use okay, yeah, sure you might be right. Okay, it's a opened up a Pandora's box. Zoom. I just was using this as an example for what I wanted to do, but terms become very significant. Terms become very, very significant. Let me put you like this. Okay, that may be true. That may be true. Contrary to the fact is may be true in terms of understandings of morality, and it might be necessary for individual morality to be different than the large groups' morality. There are issues in halacha like that as well. But we're going off into a variety of other tangents. I'm dealing with something a little bit different here. I'm looking at you see, I'm trying to and we'll get some issues either, but also some other issues as well. But what I'm looking at is we have certain values. I'm trying to think of an example. The world. Well, let me give you another type of example. Well, see, I'm not. For some reason, there's a. Let you see. When we talk about kashrus, we know we're only talking about Torah definitions, clear cut. What a non-Jew says about kosher, the definition of kosher. In other words, I think this is kosher. We don't care. It's irrelevant to us. What a non-Jew says about honesty, though, we look at it differently. And the question is what's the relationship between the definition of honesty that's found in the Torah and the definition of honesty that is found in American society? We use the same term. Is the term exactly the same? Okay? When you say, to be honest, that the Torah definition of honest is honest, Like, for example, the Torah says, tzedek tirdof, righteousness, be righteous, do we have a certain definition of being righteous? Okay? And, okay? I'm thinking what I'm trying to get at is when a person defines a certain value or says a certain term, you can talk about the definition of the term. Is the term as we use that term the exact same as someone else uses that term? Such as righteousness, honesty, things of that nature. And in a certain way, Shell says no, there's little differences. It's a lot easier for us to have our own separate term when the non-Jewish world has no term for it, such as kashrus. But when the non-Jewish world has a term such as honesty, and we have a term such as honesty, then the distinction between those two terms becomes a little bit a little bit of a tension and so forth. Okay, I'm moving from you see, I'm moving away from marriage. I want to focus on the terms. Okay. When we talk about a good marriage, and someone else talks about a good marriage, we how do we relate between those two terms? See, it really looks at definitions. You're talking to someone, and the person says, this person is an honest person. How do you understand the term? How does that person understand the term? This person says, I have a good marriage. This other person says, I have a good marriage. How do you understand the term? How does the other person understand the term? See, if I say I have a kosher kitchen, yeah, you can ask questions in halacha, but it's all within halacha. If I say I have a kosher kitchen, you say, what do you mean by kosher? I'm saying, okay, I follow this shita, I follow that shita. But it's all defined within the system. I don't have a separate definition outside of the system. But if I talk about honesty, I will now go to people who are outside the system who are also using this term. And that creates a different thing. I can go out there and see a non-Jew saying, I have a good marriage. Okay? What does that person mean by I have a good marriage? Okay? When I hear that term, what does that mean? And then, does this person's understanding of the term have any weight in my definition of the term? Okay? That's the tension over here. Okay? That's really the big machlokas, let's say, between the people who promote secular studies within the Torah world, the Hersheyan school, the YU perception, Rav Yoshe Soloveitchik, so forth, Raziel Hildesheimer, David Sri Hoffman, the Rambam. They all said that there is something within the outside world that can have a voice within Torah. Okay? And the Gemara talks about it. Right? As I said, Chacham B'Goyim Tamim, wisdom says, the Gemara says, we would learn many, we have many cases. We learn this from this aspect of the world, that aspect of the world, so forth. Okay, fine. There's a lot of shittas that say we're totally uninterested. What they define as good marriage has absolutely no bearing on them. What they define as good marriage may actually be something we look upon as a bad marriage. You know, and I was going to get that as an example of this. You look at this guy, who the former head of the International Monetary Fund, who is questioned, did he rape this woman, did he not rape this woman, the maid, and so forth and so forth, and his wife stands beside him, and the evidence is there that the question is not did he do anything or not do anything. It's clear cut that his argument is that he didn't rape her, but he did have some kind of sexual contact with her. The question was it consensual or not? And his wife is standing beside him. They walk into the court holding hands. So, how do you look at that? Is that good? Is that the way a wife should act, not act? I mean, she stands by her husband. She doesn't stand by her husband. Okay. 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 The fact is that's all part of it. So the point is that there. And then I was shocked by this, and then I read an article about a whole analysis of this and how this represents strength in a marriage, not strength in a marriage. It's crazy. The truth of the matter is that there's this idea. Who do I care about? It's like sit and say it's totally secular. I don't know, nothing to do with it, with nothing to do with the consideration of anything in a Torah true marriage. Or maybe there's something theoretically that I should consider. Don't know. I really don't know. There's a lot of different issues involved. Okay, so the point is when I'm looking at it, it becomes much more of a challenge when we try to look at values or issues that the world actually looks at and defines. Okay, and that doesn't mean they have a veto. It doesn't mean they have a powerful voice. It doesn't mean we listen to them, but it means that they have something to say. Okay. Yeah. But by the way, my issue over here, Cheryl, is not what the non-Jew will say. I'm not writing an article so that you put it in CNN and say, here's the Torah perspective. That's not my issue. My issue is within Torah, looking at the world and saying what's really going on over here. What's really going on? How do I understand this? Okay, and is there something, because we both are working within the same general perceptions, does it have a voice or not have a voice? See, I'll give you an example. I'll give you another example. Another example for marriage. If you look at, let's say, the way women are in our world today, okay? Women basically have, well, you see, it applies to everything in the world. You see, the fact is that have we been influenced by our external world? Is that a good thing or a bad thing? And that's a big issue. So okay. See, okay, Donald put up this thing. As terrible as it sounds, Rabbi, I still have the belief that arranged marriage are the best. I'm not sure what you mean by arranged marriages. There's that covers a whole variety of definitions. Okay, you can have an arranged marriage where the arrangement is imposed upon the couple. You can have an arranged marriage when they basically set up on shidduchim, but they still have to make their own decision, and so forth. Okay. That's fine. Okay, I mean, we're not talking about picking up in a bar. You're right. A lot of the times, when you make the statement that arranged marriages are the best, what I find is that what you're really talking is a completely different definition of marriage. See, what's interesting is you say arranged marriages are the best. The question is what's your definition of the best? What I have found is that people have very, very different definitions of marriage. And I find that people, when they talk about arranged marriages are the best, usually have a certain definition of marriage. And that people who don't like arranged marriages usually have a very different definition of marriage. And it's very, very different. So the fact is the really interesting perspective in what you wrote, Donald, was when you said the best is the yardstick you use for finding the best. Okay? And what do you think is that result? Okay, so you say, hey, it's the best type of marriage. What are your goals in the marriage? Okay, and does this achieve? And what you usually find is people who promote arranged marriages usually have a specific definition of marriage, and this might be the best way of achieving that definition. People who don't like arranged marriages usually find that they have a very different definition of marriage. Okay, I'm not sure if they have the same goals. See, once you say they have the same goals, we're talking across. I'm not talking about, within the Jewish world right now. Same goals. Who says that person over there has the same goal for marriage as I have? Who says? And the fact is, if a person doesn't have the same goals in marriages, okay, then yeah, within the marriage, who says that's supposed to have a say in my understanding of marriage? Okay. Okay. The you see, what we're getting at over here is not the evaluation. I'm not talking about what's best, what's not best. This is right and this is wrong. We're not talking about black and white, right here. We're not talking this is right and wrong. Okay? We're talking the world of ideas. And that out there in the world of ideas, there are many, many different ideas. And the aspect of how the Torah individual deals with those variant ideas. And the questions of ideas include ideas where they define terms that we're dealing with as well. If you go out there, that's really what I was trying to say in the starting point. You go out there to the world. Again, I'll say it. The world's not dealing with kosher. Okay? You go out there and say, hi, are you what's kosher? Now, the truth is that non-Jews may think kosher means, oh, it's clean. Like I once saw an ad by Hebrew National in the 70s. Kosher means clean. Glatt kosher means super clean. All Hebrew National chickens and turkeys are glatt kosher. Very, very nice. You've taken a term and totally misapplied it. First of all, kosher does not mean clean. And second of all, there's no such thing as a glatt kosher chicken or turkey. They took a term and said, listen, you guys out there, we're going to take a term that is a very technical term, we're going to throw it out there, and then we're going to get you to buy our product because we've given you to a certain way. That's not what I'm talking about here. Kosher, right? The world out there has no use for that term. But honesty, they use that term. You know, I was watching this, and I was going to speak tonight about the debt situation, the ethics of the debt, and what do you call it? You know, I hear everyone saying fair. Okay, we got to be fair in how we come to this conclusion. Okay, everyone's using that term. What fair? What does fair mean? You're all using that term. What do you mean? You're all using the term, and the fact is, you all mean something different by it. But the fact is we sometimes use terms that the world also uses, such as love, such as honesty, such as fair. And the question is, how do we relate with those terms? I just want to read Donald's point right now. Cheryl, you have a valid point. At a young age, okay, Cheryl's point was, maybe this one, I think that perhaps one needs to have experience of arranged marriage in order to comment meaningfully on its values. And then Donald wrote, Cheryl, you have a good, valid point. At a young age, an arranged marriage between a young rabbi's daughter and I was arranged. Unfortunately, she died in an accident before we married. It is very sad. Very sad. You really... Anyway, but the point is you have to have some knowledge of the concept. All I'm saying is that when we talk about arranged marriages, when we talk about this is better, this is not better, usually you have a very different definition of what a good marriage is. Okay? I know many people that have been, and it's not only that, you know, arranged marriages. I know many arranged marriages that ended up in divorce, and I know many arranged marriages that I'm telling you, that shadchan should whoever set up that arranged marriage has din b'cheshbon for Kodesh Baruch Hu. I can't believe it. Some of these arranged marriages that are set up with not telling the whole truth and not saying just arrange it, so forth and so forth, putting people together. They have nothing. Okay. It's unbelievable. Arranged marriages don't always work. On the other hand, there's some people who, you know, love at first sight and they have a great marriage. Again, what do you mean by a great marriage? What do you mean it doesn't work? I mean, the fact is that it's hard to talk about these things, but a lot of times it's what you're looking for. Fact of the matter is I have a whole piece on this, and we will do one night on marriage. The fact is, I point out that there are many, many different models of marriage in a Jewish perspective, in a Torah perspective, and that different different goals in each one of those marriages. In other words, different marriages have different goals. In other words, like Yitzchak and Rivka's marriage is different than Yaakov and Rachel's marriage. Who is different from Yaakov and Sarah's marriage, and who is different than David and Bathsheba's marriage, or David and Abigail's marriage. You take the situation, Yaakov Yaakov and Leah, and Yaakov and Rachel. What the better marriage? What's a good marriage? What do you think? The fact is, it's not so simple. Okay. The fact of the matter is that, Donald, the divorce rate usually. I don't know if you ever noticed this. First of all, the observant come up, but usually what is being said now is that the divorce rate and the observant are less than 2%. What's really coming out right now? Donald writes in here, right? Can you explain why divorce rate among the observant in Israel is less than 2% versus the secular, which is over 50%? Again, completely different definitions of what they are looking for in their marriage. I mean, I'm not defending something. I'm not arguing something. I'm not saying the secular is better or not better. I'm saying there's two different definitions. Okay? If you define in the observant rate over here, you'll find that they'll have a certain type of marriage. That if you went to the secular and said this is the kind of marriage, they say, I would divorce. I'd be out of there within a minute. And usually a lot of that has to do with romance. Has to do with relationships. I mean, there's a book. It's a book called. There's perceptions we have. It's like if you stay within narrow confines of things, you get certain perspectives. There's a book out there, Educated but Ignorant. It's a book by a woman who got her PhD from, I think, Hebrew U in Israel, or Tel Aviv U in Israel, where she did a study of the women in a Ger community in Tel Aviv. It's a very, very interesting book. It's basically a book on this community, specifically about how women are related in Ger and so forth and so forth. And the name of her book was Educated but Ignorant. Okay, basically she said all these women they go to all these shiurim and they're still ignorant, right? Okay, how she defines ignorant. The woman who wrote it was secular, obviously. How she defines ignorant. Okay, fine. I'm not evaluating her, whatever it is, but she talks about the relationship between the husband and the wife. Okay? And the way she just describes it basically is, this is what they call a marriage. I would never want to be involved in that kind of relationship. It's basically what she comes across it. Now, this couple that she's describing, they may think they have a good marriage from their perspective. They may never even consider divorce. But the secularist looks at them and says, you know something? I would never want to be in a marriage like that. Based upon the dynamics of what she observes in the marriage. Well, there's so much evaluation there you're looking at, but I'm not looking at this from evaluation. I'm not going to sit there and say right, wrong. So I'm saying, how do we look at a term? We have a term, okay? Terms that have no standing in the non-Jewish world have no standing. Therefore, we don't have to look at the non-Jewish world. There's different viewpoints within the Torah. Well, we go look at different viewpoints in the Torah world. Fine. Then there's the perspective of terms that we use that the non-Jewish world also uses: fair, honest, love, and so forth. So, how do we relate to when they use those terms? Well, you can sit there and say, maybe we're using the same terms, but we mean two different things. Fine. Maybe we mean two different things. I'm okay with that. On the other hand, maybe we don't. Maybe there's supposed to be some connection between the two. And that's the challenge. And that really is, and that's a big machlokas in Jewish thought. Between how much you have to learn secular education and not learn secular education, how much it does affect things, not affect things. Okay? And I quoted sometimes it says, yes, you can learn from non-Jews, otherwise you can't learn from non-Jews. You know? And a whole variety of issues like this. Okay? Yeah, by the way, Cheryl, your point, I'm going to read Cheryl's point. Rabbi, what about the fact of changed social conditions that affect everyone, Jew and non-Jew, but differ greatly from the world that existed when the Torah was written, and thus when the purpose and meaning of marriage is found in it? So the fact is changing social conditions. How does it relate? Well, you have to be very careful about how you formulate this idea. Torah is eternal. The point is, Torah deals with the world. Okay, so you have a lot of halachic issues where you have the eternal Torah relating to changing facts in the world. Cheryl says there's more time, more leisure, more need for relationality. These are all factors involved. We live in just for example, in terms of my family. Okay, my son is in L.A. My two daughters are in New York. My other son is here in Toronto. Right? Completely, far-flung family. How does that affect the family movements? And then there's other issues involved and so forth. I mean, okay, yeah, and Cheryl, you bring up the issue of birth control, stuff like that. I mean, the fact is that and I'll tell you another example of changing wealth. Okay, the fact is that by the way, Cheryl raised the question of birth control, and Donald raises the issue about birth that in my practice birth control is not allowed. I'm not going to get into the whole issue of birth control. It's a wide spectrum of halacha on birth control. Wide spectrum of halacha on birth control. Of when is it mutter, when is it not mutter, whole variety of issues on it. And for example, I'll give you an example. Even there's a statement from Rav Hutner. The question is like I don't say except for life reasons. The question was asked of, I think it was Rav Hutner, of a woman who wanted to use birth control to space her children because she felt it was better for children to be spaced out and so forth. So she should be a better parent and so forth and so forth. So I believe it was Rav Hutner. Okay, but there was a gadol. The past generation said up to 5 years after birth you can use birth control for this reason. Why? Because women nursed in the old world for 5 years, and when women nursed in the old world for 5 years, generally they couldn't have children. So you see that no one told them to stop nursing. Fact is that nursing was important for the children and so forth. So there's a whole variety of viewpoints on this issue. Okay, so I don't want to get involved in it, but I mentioned wealth before. Okay, Cheryl said good point. Wealth. The fact is that there's a tremendous issue in terms of wealth nowadays. How does that affect? Dahl mentioned the ksuba. How does it affect the relationship of husband and wife? Okay, there's wife's responsibilities to in terms of the husband having more wealth. What responsibilities does the wife have? Okay, how much does does wife still have to cook? Have to cook when the husband's where the family is worth $25 million and they could buy ready-made every night. Maybe not. Maybe something else involved. A lot of different dynamics change. You're right. Okay, it's very, very different. Anyways, something. We'll try and pick up this topic next week. Okay, because I really want to get something. I wanted to talk about the debt. I wanted to talk about the ethics of the debt. What I really wanted to talk about was really a lot of this issue in terms of looking at the world. I talked about what's his name, DSK. Donald, I agree with you. I'd rather live in a shack with a woman I love than to live in a mansion without love. There's a Gemara that says that when a husband and wife are in love, they can sleep together on the what do you call it? On the side of a sword. Okay. In other words, very limited space they can sleep together. But a husband and wife are are at odds with each other. Even the biggest bed they can't sleep within, right? Okay? Right. Okay. And Alex points well thing. What's Donald's definition of love? Part of it. It's all part. It's really becomes interesting, and as you talk about it. Okay. It's very, very interesting that let's say I'm going to give a very, very strange example to sort of end up tonight. There's I was in a DVD store recently, like a Blockbuster or whatever. Just there for a couple minutes. There's a certain DVD I wanted to pick up, whatever. I was just walking out, and I saw that there were some DVDs there. Seems to be this big theme of one of those big themes of people sort of having affairs in marriages for the benefit of the marriage. Seems to be that this is a theme on these DVDs, And by the way, one of the reasons I look at these DVDs is because I find it fascinating what it tells me about our society. It's like sometimes from just reading a DVD cover, I sort of understand, well, what's a society about? Something. So there's this whole theory of how if you allow the husband and wife a little allowance for infidelity, it will make the marriage work better. Okay? And I see that they have psychologists and they have this and they have that, all these other things. Totally awesome. By definition, it would destroy the marriage. Okay, that ends the marriage. Well, what are you talking? The fact is that in that view. By the way, Donald, you're totally welcome to express your views. And the fact is no one should be expressing views is what Torah is about. Okay, you're allowed to express your views, and people are allowed to disagree. That's called shakla v'tarya. And you don't you're not forgiving for just your opinions. Are they inappropriate? Your opinions are opinions from a Torah Jew.